The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host, ably assisted today by my canine companion, Toto. In fact, he's been getting a little tiny treat. So I'm recording this session late in the month of January. So there's still Christmas treats left around. Somebody got him a little bag of treats that are tiny little Christmas trees that are peanut butter and vanilla flavored, that are little dog biscuits. So he's if for those of you that are listening and not seeing a picture of him, he's a 7-pound miniature poodle and is just a great friend of mine. Today we're working on the second of three what we call parts of a trilogy, 3 shows. Last time I introduced you to the character of Samuel the Clothier. He's included in my most recent book that only came out about 6 weeks ago. So not that many people have read it yet, and it's not in audio form until I finish it. And we hope to finish that in the next week and get that uploaded to Audible. So this story doesn't have a wide circulation, and consequently, I'm usually doing this second video. I call it a compassionate response because I get responses from listeners, readers, people who comment, particularly in emails, about some impact that the story had on them or something it provoked in them. And very often, because the stories that I tell involve people who died suddenly or traumatically, very often people who are receiving these stories are doing that through a wounded heart. A lot of times it's parents or spouses or somebody that's grieving the loss of someone. And when that loss comes in a sudden, violent way, it's all the harder. Anyway, the way that we're going about this story is I'll recap just a little bit of it, but you can find it now, at least in the print book form, in the ebook form on Amazon. It's Afterlife Interrupted, Book 3. Please let me explain. The stories were all chosen because I thought that the people telling them did an exceptional job of explaining either what led to and through their death or what their afterlife healing process has been to this point. Something about the way that they explained things that I thought was valuable to pass along to people like you. So just to recap, Samuel showed me very little in a dream. I knew that I was with a gentleman who I thought of as portly. That's a positive adjective to use for a person. Maybe stout would be another. For somebody more athletic, maybe stocky. Um, an unflattering or unkind way to defer to a similar person might have been flabby. We have a lot of adjectives that describe physical appearance, and in this case, weight. Anyway, I just thought he had dignity and bearing and was portly, well-groomed, well-clothed, and we were doing nothing but facing each other in a conversation when he collapsed, hit the floor, and was gone. And I woke up, and I heard the word "clothier" as the dream was ending. That's an uncommon word. So again, that story is there told in fullness in book 3. He explained in the crossing that we did with him and in the subsequent follow-up, we don't use any of their stories without going back a second time and getting their permission to make them public. Well, anyway, he explained that he was a homosexual person in a time and place where, had that been known, it would have been disastrous for him. Or I don't know if he used the word disaster, but it was very much a negative that would have caused a lot of more complications in his life. He had decided in his late adolescence that there was nothing to be done except make the best of it. That's kind of the way he approached it. And he said, I was determined to have a happy life. And he said, for good or ill, the way that a man appeared caught my eye. And he took that trait, which he thought is morally neutral because for good or ill, maybe anyway, he said that's the way it was. That's the way it was. So I decided maybe I could do something with that that would be for the common good. He ended up working in the line of fine menswear, learning about drape and cloth and texture, and particularly for men who could afford tailoring. Uh, he could work in stores where he had an expertise that was helpful. He told us too that one of the things that he most enjoyed about his line of work, and he spoke of it in vocational kind of language, he said the bread and butter was mostly stockbrokers and lawyers who people expected to have a manicured appearance. And so they were willing to spend the money to have someone, a consultant like Samuel, help them pick out clothes that most flattered them. He also told us that as much as he enjoyed working with these steady clients, he really enjoyed the occasions when some guy that hardly ever bought an expensive suit of clothes did so, perhaps before a wedding or a job interview. And he said this might be the only time in their life where they're ever in a store like the one I worked in. But he told us how he went about his work. He said, he said, I wasn't a costumer. I wasn't trying to dress someone up to look like something they are not, the way that we might at Halloween or masquerade. He said, I wasn't a costumer. I would ask them if they would please to tell me something about their appearance that they liked. And he said, very often people struggle to do that. But if they would do that, he would he would then say, now may I have your permission to tell you what I think about your appearance that is a strength that we can accentuate and build upon. And then he gave the example. He said, I might say to a person with green eyes, you have piercing green eyes. Anything that we do in your clothing that has shades of green will lead people to have better eye contact with you, and you'll have better quality communications and conversations. Isn't that interesting? Um, so anyway, in the story, he told us how his own guardian presented himself in his afterlife as someone who might have been a long-term loyal customer, and his guardian and he, were building a relationship, and it wasn't exactly clear to him that this was his guardian angel. He was just this guy that was helpful. And he said he didn't have wings or a halo or anything. Um, but um, anyway, uh, his guardian said to him, would you allow me to show myself to you as I truly am? I just loved that line. Would you allow me to show myself to you as I truly am? Maybe a few times in your life, if you haven't put it in so many words, maybe there have been occasions where you were vulnerable enough with someone to put down any defenses or false fronts and be seen as you truly are, whatever that meant. Well, anyway, that's what he did. And then he said, now watch me carefully. And he said he pirouetted and he went from being in the human form that he had been showing me to a being of light. And he said it was the most radiant, beautiful light he had ever seen. And his whole life had been about physical beauty and style and color, shape, form. And he said, I've never seen anything as beautiful as what you just showed me. And he said, well, now I'm going to turn back into the form that you're used to seeing me in. But now I would like you to step into this mirrored space and allow yourself to see yourself as you truly are. It was one of those mirrored spaces that you've probably seen in some clothing store where there's one flat mirror in front of you and then two angled at a 45-degree, where you sort of stand in this space made by these three planes of mirrors, so that you can get a better view peripherally of your side to side, a broader vision of what these clothes might look like on you. Except it wasn't clothes. He was just said, "Now you do what I did. You just turn." And when he did, he also became brilliant light and then turned back into his human form and was asked to tell me what you just saw. And he said, uh, uh, beauty that's beyond words. And he said, well, that's what you are. Well, I loved that story so because I wonder if there's anybody that makes it through a full human life without some kind of negative thinking about themselves and about their appearance. Um, uh, I'd like to meet that person. And I've done a lot of pastoral counseling, and one of the things that sometimes is necessary when you get a sense that people really are their own worst critic or their own they get in their own way and sadden themselves with something that has to do with self-image, to try to get them to take another look. Is there another way that we could look at your circumstance and see things differently? Well, anyway, I hope that if any of you struggle with anything like that, where there's something about you, either in terms of physical appearance or personal history, resume, um, sometimes people go into moral categories and have regrets about things that they've done that they feel can't be forgiven, or whatever it might be, whatever it might make you think that you are not at all important or you're degraded in some way. I hope that you find Samuel's story helpful, because we all are made of the stuff of God. We're made of light and wonder. And even if we've done something to kind of tarnish that image, we can't change the fact that we're wonderfully made. It's in the Psalms. It says we're beautifully, wonderfully made. So that I'm just reiterating that. But another thing I want to highlight in this kind of uh, response thing is I really admired the way that he assessed himself at about 19 or 20, saw an apparent negative, his sexual orientation and the way that that would be perceived were it known. He couldn't really do much of anything about that, but he didn't let that derail him. He said, I was determined to live a happy life. And he didn't only live a happy life, but he lived a life of service. He knew that he would be happiest if he were serving people in some way that made their lives better. And it turned out, he said, the fact that I had some eye for what made a man look good, I could turn that into a service that I could do for other people. He particularly talked about how he loved it when he knew that somebody could barely afford his services and had probably never bought custom clothing before. He said sometimes it was mystical. Like he said, I would just get this notion that, oh my God, I know just the thing and I know where it is in the back room. And he'd have something, he said, that fit them like a glove and that didn't need tailoring. He said that was important because tailoring was an extra expense that men of more modest means couldn't afford. So he said it gave him great joy when he found just the right thing. And sometimes he said, I felt like I was directed toward it. Like there was some, spirit helper that was part of his an invisible workforce. Anyway, he he the part that I want to accentuate in this brief podcast is that he did an assessment of himself at about 19, I think, and he took an apparent negative, his orientation, and made it useful, and 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 found a lifelong vocation. He lived into old age. He told us that he had retired from that work, but it was the kind of work that you could be invited back into if someone were sick, uh, or if there were a need to mentor someone coming up that you might know some things that you could pass along. Well, right now, for those of you that are seeing this, you can see that I have my little dog friend in my lap, and I've been feeding them these tiny little Christmas trees that he likes very much. And I'm not very filling. But right now, what I'm doing is picking up a deck of cards. I'm picking up a deck of cards. I love to play cards, and in fact, I'm scheduling a game coming up soon with some friends. I like to play a double um, deck Pinochle. When you play with six people and two decks of Pinochle cards, when the game is first beginning, you have 14 cards in your hand, and Toto is smelling them because I don't think he's seen me hold playing cards. He wants to know what they are. Well, uh, you when you I like when I do you like to play cards? What the way that I like to be dealt to is I don't like to pick up my cards one at a time as the dealer distributes them. I like to wait until they're all dealt and then pick them all up at once. And then the first thing that you do, according to the rules of whatever game you're playing, is assess the strengths and weaknesses of your hand. I like Pinochle. It's a little bit like bridge, but not as complicated. Hearts, spades, rummy. They're all kind of card games where when you first dealt your cards, the first thing you do is pick them up and assess what are the strengths and weaknesses of this hand. Sometimes you're playing with a partner, so you have to keep in mind how might I help my partner, but you don't know exactly what they've got either. So, like in bridge, you at least bid where you can kind of let your partner know what strengths and weaknesses you might have according to how you bid a hand. Well, anyway, I I I thought that Samuel's way of looking at his life was creative, and that he took an apparent negative and turned it to a positive. When I play Pinnacle, um, you might have you might have a really low card like a nine of clubs, and you think, how can I make this win a trick? And once in a while, you get to do it. Some card that's not at all strong, if it's played in just the right way, at just the right moment, it is strong. Well, I've had to do. My life has had very many changes in it because of my religious vow of obedience to go where I'm sent. And so there's been maybe an uncommon number of times where I've had to not exactly reinvent myself, but at least adapt to a new context and a new role and a new set of housemates and so on, where climates sometimes, very often in a place where you hardly know anybody and all your friends are now at a distance somewhere else. And so how to take whatever life brings you and approach it as a new hand. That's been a way that I've moved through my life of almost 68 years. Um, Rather than grouse about something, if you're going to play cards, once in a while you're going to get a hand that really isn't very good. And I think over the life course, life gives you some circumstances to deal with that just are not very good. Illnesses and disappointments of different kinds, financial troubles, all kind of things. But I've tried to be something like Samuel in saying, yeah, this isn't what I wish it were, but how can I make things better? How can I work with what I've got? And then I like to remind myself too, that phrase, this too shall pass. People use that when there's something that's distressing in the present moment, and it's probably going to endure for a while. But part of the way to move through it is to think, well, remember, this is temporary. This will pass. The sun will come out tomorrow, something like that. I don't think that's just necessarily, idle cheerfulness. It's just a strategy for moving through life. And I think Samuel demonstrated that. So I wondered if that would be helpful to you to think, um, when you play cards, you play for the evening. You don't play just one hand. And it might be that you're given a hand that isn't really very good. If you're playing with a partner, sometimes you can turn over authority to the partner and let them know through the way that you signal according to the rules of the game that my hand is not very strong. I'm looking to you to be the stronger partner in this moment. There are analogies there maybe, but I've sometimes enjoyed in a card game playing a weak hand to see how I can maximize it. In Pinnacle, for example, if you get lots of aces, you're probably going to win and score high, which is fun. But it doesn't take very much skill to do that. The aces, outrank the things. And if you got a whole bunch of them, you naturally win that hand rather easily. Sometimes it's even, that's fun. I like that. I like winning. But sometimes I've enjoyed having a weak hand that, with enough craft and skill and careful attention to how the cards are being played, I might be able to turn this into uh, a victory. In my life, the vow of poverty has meant that you just can't go to the store and buy whatever you want. And so and I was an art student originally. So taking kind of the vow of poverty has made me look at my life and my surroundings and take whatever's on hand and figure out how to use that to best advantage to make something beautiful. For example, in uh, living spaces, paint doesn't cost much. I remember my mom visiting me once, and I said, this place is just dirty, and the leadership of it at the time didn't seem to notice it, and didn't seem to care, and and very often would say, we can't afford something. And have you ever been in a circumstance like that where there's just sort of a dour attitude that pervades a place, and those who live in it or are in charge of it are content with things as they are, even if they're a mess? Well, I remember her saying, "Well, yeah, but soap and water don't cost much." I said, "You're right." And so I started doing some cleaning without being real aggressive about showing anybody up. I just started, whenever I could get away with it, quietly cleaning up areas and decluttering and stuff. I've done a lifetime of that. So that's just in a physical space, but in spiritual space or in one's life, I just think I really admire the way Samuel just looked at things and looked at his life as a young person and said, I'm going to make this good. I'm going to work with what I've got and make it better. And as a Catholic Christian, one of the ways that I do that regularly is with the Lord's Prayer. You know how when we pray the Lord's Prayer, we say, give us today our daily bread. Give me today what I need. I'm only asking for bread. I'm not asking for a buffet. I'm not asking for, some outlandishly expensive meal. Could I just have some bread, please? The bread that I need for the day. And then receive that, and then uh, make some good use out of things. Uh, so I think I might be going on too long and belaboring it. Don't you get the point, don't you? That it could be that the Samuel story could inspire in you, as it has in me, a kind of a new resolution to look at what I've got, kind of it's sort of glass half full kind of idea. It's not completely original, but I just like meeting Samuel and seeing the way he went about life, and especially how he helped other people walk out of his store with a kind of skip in their step, or a boost to their own sense of self that might have set them up for a great day, or maybe a life of service to other people. So with that, I'm going to leave it at that. As always, remember that I'm praying for you. If there's something I can do to help you, you can contact me through my website, nathan-castle.com. So for my assistant today, Toto, and myself, God bless you. Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.